The last thing you need to do when you're building your requirements is you're going to need to validate each of your requirements. When they are modeled, you need to examine them for inconsistencies, omissions, and ambiguities. But more specifically, you're also going to need to check for these following things. 1, is each requirement consistent with the overall objectives of the system or product? 2, have all requirements been specified at the proper level of abstraction? 3, is the requirement really necessary, or does it represent more of an add-on feature that may not be essential to the actual objective of the system? Note that this is where a customer and a developer might have some differing opinions, and therefore some of these may need to be negotiated. Next, is each requirement bounded and unambiguous? Do any requirements conflict with other requirements? In a small system, this might seem silly, but in a larger system where you have multiple departments trying to use an enterprise application, this will happen more often than you think. Next, is each requirement achievable in the technical environment that will house the system or product? Is each requirement testable once implemented to make sure it's done correct? Next, does the requirements model properly reflect information, function, and behavior of the system to be built? Have requirement patterns been used to simplify the requirements model? Have all patterns been properly validated? And are all patterns consistent with customer requirements? Requirements negotiation is often used to help ensure that requirements are reasonable and can be met in an appropriate amount of time. You should look towards a win-win situation, not a winner takes all. I once worked at a place where the company came in to redesign some of our systems. It was a large project, and one of the requirements was that the change was to occur by a given date. This seemed kind of odd to a lot of people, and we really needed more time, but that date would not budge. And because this came from a senior management position, we couldn't negotiate it, and as a result, features that were needed were left out and or untested. When we went live, there were over 200 defects found on the very first day. Luckily, many were small and were able to be easily fixed within the first week or two. However, almost none of those should have ever occurred. And had proper time been given to properly building out the requirements, testing, and user integration testing, most of those would have been found and fixed before we went live. We dug into the reason kind of just out of curiosity as to why that requirement was so important. And it turns out that someone's bonus was tied to that go live date. So you cannot always assume that people are negotiating from a position of good faith and be willing to stand up for what is right. So do the best that you can with your negotiating, validate the requirements as best you can, work towards the final goal, and hopefully you'll have a good project.